Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and hello. I'm here with Ayesha Jabbar. Ayesha is
Hi.
my colleague at Oxford University Press. We work together and we've prepared a session on playing with words to talk about how books can be used in different ways to help with creativity. So I'm going to ask Aisha before we begin, why do we normally talk about books as a person's best friend? What is it about them?
Well, I think it's got to do with how friends the similarities between good friends and good books really because good books are always there for you when you need them. You can always pick them up and you can snuggle and get into an exciting world together. I think also because good books, just like good friends, give you good company and make you happy. So that's it for me.
Yeah, and they can be dragged around like stuffed toys. Not exactly drag friends around like stuffed toys, but you can do that with books. So that's the good part. Now, when we talk about playing with words, how is it that children can play with words? What does that mean?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Well, playing with words, all sorts of things. I think words are such a wonderful tool. They help you express your feelings, they help you understand what people are saying, but they can be slightly tricky to remember at times. And I think that's where the playing bit comes in for me. I really like playing with words to remember spelling and to be able to read interesting things. And then there are all sorts of wonderful games. I remember playing so many word games when I was growing up, even now. And I think we're going to do some of those today, aren't we?
We are. Thank, thank you very much, Aisha. So I am going to take a bit of time, your time, while I put up some slides on playing with words, and then I'll ask you to come back if that's okay with yours.
Sure.
Okay, so here we are. You can all see playing with words. And here I've got a word for you to try out. Now, every word that we read in a book doesn't have to make sense. In fact, there are many words that children come across and even adults come across in books that they don't know the meaning of. How do we make sense of a word that we are not familiar with? So when I was small, one of the first words, or rather really long word that I was introduced to was supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. And obviously I didn't know what it means. No one does. But the only way to read this very long word was to break it up into syllables. So that's what we're going to talk about for a minute or two. It helps to break words down into syllables so that we're able to handle them better. And every word that you read in a book doesn't have to have a meaning. Sometimes we have what we call nonsensical words. So it's a little poem, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Even the sound of it is simply quite atrocious. How many syllables do you think this word has? Now, if we were to break it up, we would have supercalifragilistic expialidocious. That's how we piece together a word. You can have a go by thinking about your own name and how many syllables your name might have. My name has 2 syllables. It's Neda. So we clap every time we recognize the syllable in the word. Neda has 2. Um, Ayesha has 3. Ayesha has 3 in her name. You might want to start with that. Now, there are lots of very famous authors and poets who have come up with their own words. Words don't always have to be taken from somewhere. We can invent our own words as well as we go along. In fact, sometimes there's a feeling that you recognize inside you, but there might not be a word for that feeling. And you might want to make up your own words. That's what great writers do. And that's what we mean really by playing with words. Let's try another one, Oompa Loompa. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Oompa Loompa from Roald Dahl's book, but you might want to think about developing a character like Oompa Loompa, giving it your own name, and then coming up with a vision of it, a drawing that tells us what Oompa Loompa looks, what your character looks like, what color, what kind of face, what size. Is it a wide character, a fat one? Is it a thin and skinny one? Is it going to be a tall one? Is it going to be a short one? You might want to come up with your own character. Not everyone has to be a fantastic writer, but we can be creative thinkers, and that's where great writing starts. So once we have that character in our minds, our teachers or another adult can help us develop that character, the habits of that character. We might want to give it a description. And some of those, the words that we use, the strong adjectives or the wow words as we call them, some of those words don't have to make sense to anyone. They can be words that we've come up with. So here we go. Writers invent their own words. Shakespeare did that. Roald Dahl is one of them as well. And here you go. You have some on the screen. You've got rotsam and repulsant. Do you actually know what those words mean? And do you know what gobblefunk is? So Roald Dahl came up with something like 500 new words and called this language gobblefunk. And obviously that doesn't mean anything as well, but he came up with his own new language. And most of these was nonsensical, but once you read the books and you see the words in context within sentences, they start making sense because he's given the words his own meaning. Writers observe. That's how they develop their thinking, their creativity. That's how they develop their ability to make up words. They observe people, they observe things around them, they observe feelings within themselves, and then they give words to those feelings. Do you recognize these characters? This is not something you would have seen in real life or would see in real life, but these are characters from Roald Dahl's books. They call gremlins. And we can come up with creatures like that when we start thinking about writing our own book or even our own short poem. We can come up with characters entirely from our own imagination. And then we think about what they're like. And we talk about them with other people, with our teachers and with other adults around us. And that's how stories develop when we start telling people stories verbally, such as your little brother or your sister or a younger cousin that you may have. You might want to make your own story up, make your own characters up, and even your own words. So here is how we might want to do it. Build a picture in your mind of what you want to say, what actually happens in your story. Once you might want to decide, first you might want to decide what will happen in your story, and that is called a plot. When you talk about developing a plot for your story, that also comes from your real life experiences, can come from your imagination entirely, and you might want to talk about something that has never happened, something magical, something perhaps it could be something scientific as well, a scientific discovery that you have in your mind that hasn't yet happened, or it could be something very ordinary that happens in everyday life. And you start thinking about that as the main plot in your story, and then you bring it all together with characters. Who is the character in your story? Who's the main character? Who is your character talking to? Who is your character interacting with? That's where your action comes from, exactly the same as action in movies. And then we make up words for them. So words that have words that might be strong adjectives to describe them, or words that might be verbs to describe their action. What does your character do? And then, of course, you might want to think about not using the same words that you're used to, words that you um, have been using all along for years and years and years. You might want to think about using a variety of words, different kinds of words. Perhaps look it up using a dictionary. There's some fabulous Oxford University Press dictionaries that are available. Even digitally, you can also check them out on the internet. And that's how you add to your story. You can draw your characters. You can use a storyboard like the kind that you see on the screen to draw the action, the sequence of events in your story, and then you can add detail to it. So, what's your word? If you could write down in the chat box what your word might be, mine is brillful. And from brillful to me means someone who is full of life and brilliant at the same time. Now, I don't exactly have a word that describes people who are full of life and brilliant, very, very smart. So I've come up with my own word, brillful. And for me, there's nervous excitement in a lot of things. Sometimes I'm very excited to do something, but I'm nervous at the same time. And I would call that nervexy. So you might want to put your own words in the chat box if you thought of any. And if you are a parent or a teacher, you might want to encourage children to play with words as a way of stimulating creativity. So Roald Dahl came up with about 500 new words, just a little over 500 words, and has a special dictionary by Oxford University Press called the Oxford Roald Dahl Dictionary. And we also have the Oxford Roald Dahl Thesaurus that children might use to delve deeper into Roald Dahl's way of inventing words. One of them is mushes. Now, what might mushes mean? It's something that's mushes was both mushy and delicious. Now, there's one thing that I can think of, a marshmallow maybe, that is mushy and delicious. Is there anyone here who'd like to write in the chat box, someone who can think of something that is mushes? It need not be something that you can eat, just something that reminds you of mushy and delicious at the same time. And then you've got the word hapted at the bottom of the screen. If you can make a wild guess as to what hapted might mean, would you like to put down your guesses in the chat box? It's interesting to do this with people around you as well as you're playing with words and inventing new words. You might want to quiz them on what those words could actually mean. And that might be your activity for an evening in lockdown with your family. And here we are. So, how do we actually learn new words? A lot of people use dictionaries to decipher the meanings of the words that they don't know. Many people try to understand the meaning from the context of the word. So, it's there in a sentence. We read the sentence and we try and figure out what the word means from what the sentence tells us. That is called contextualizing a word. But you could also follow alphabetical order in a dictionary and find the word for yourself, because dictionaries not only tell you the meaning of a word, they also give you the synonyms and the antonyms. So words that mean the same thing and words that are the opposite of the word that you're looking for. And they also help you pronounce words. So dictionaries can serve a lot of purposes. And the thing is, it's easy peasy to use a dictionary if you buy one that's age appropriate. Once you get into the habit of using a dictionary, it does become your best friend, because when you start writing, or even when you're reading and you're unfamiliar with certain words, you can very quickly pick up a dictionary and figure out what the word is. And of course, it helps you read better because it teaches you pronunciation at the same time. So here's a little inspiration for you. Here is Oxford University Press's Roald Dahl dictionary. It gives you the meanings of words. It also shows you how to explore big words, complicated words. So here, for example, it's giving me the meaning of, let's read one from here. Um, Zosimus. They might not be, now it might sound very unusual, but the dictionary calls it extra usual. It's very creative. And if you use it as part of a sentence, you could actually decipher the meaning of the word zosimus. What might it mean? Would you like to think about that? And now I'm going to ask Aisha to take over. I might come back for a bit towards the end of the session. Aisha, you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Neda. Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. I'm just going to stop sharing so you can share your screen if that's okay. There you
Sure.
go. Yeah, I've stopped sharing now. All yours.
Thanks a lot, Neda. What a wonderful session. I really enjoyed some of the words that you made up, and I think they're brilliant. I think I'm going to use them more often.
Yeah, well, I was hoping someone would try and decipher the meaning and write it in the chat box. I don't think we got any comments in the chat box, but it's really nice to have words put in, words that kids are making up, or even adults. It's a fun activity. It's a great pastime as well for families, something they can do together. Oh, we've got a comment from Seema. Children develop their own words too, and those words are usually considered slang. They usually put together two words like chillax. Yes, I kind of like chillax. It has a really nice feel to it, though. That's true. That's absolutely true. Okay, over to you, Aisha.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. Here we are. All right. So I'm going to continue with the same theme that Nida spoke about, playing with words. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the real words now. And just like Nida in the beginnings started with breaking down words into syllables and then into sounds. So that's what we're going to focus on. I bet you've all learned about phonics in early years. When you were little and when you were in school, and we somehow sort of think that phonics is something for the little ones, but it's a very helpful tool that lets you play with words and understand words and master words at the same time. So that's what we're going to do today. We are going to look at some words, and we're going to try and pull them apart and see what sounds they're made up of. And we're going to see how that's going to help us in reading new words, in spelling words, even remembering spelling lists, and then how it can help with pronunciation as well. So that's what we are going to do today. So do you remember the sounds that you learned in preschool? So I'm going to give you a minute to just type in if you remember the sounds that you've learned in preschool. Here are some of the sounds that we all learned. These are the 44 sounds in English. English is, the writing system is incredibly complex in the sense that there's so many different sounds, but we've only got 26 letters to represent them. So what we do is, for the extra sounds that are left, we put together letters and groups of letters to represent those sounds. So just to go over the sounds, these are the common ones. So there's t, a, and e, e, o. All of these sounds. And then there are some more tricky ones, such as this sound over here in rain, a. So that's the A sound. And then we've got the long E sound that we can hear in ni. And then there's light. So light. So this sound is represented by three letters. Um, so so like we can see over here, some sounds are represented by one word. one letter, and then there are some that are represented by two letters, and then there are some more that are represented by three or more letters. And so that's what makes phonics so interesting and so relevant, because you've got these groups of letters that represent a sound, and we somehow forget to link them up with the sounds, which is why spelling and pronunciation seems so challenging at times, even reading new words. So just like Nida invented some new words, writers invent, like she said, writers invent new words all the time. There are also new words coming up in science, like, the name of a particular dinosaur can be very, very difficult to read because you don't know those words, and then unfamiliar words can be so challenging. So that's where phonics comes in, even in later years, even when you're an adult and a grown up. That's how we learn to read new words, particularly the longer ones. So we break them up into syllables, and then we break them up into sounds, and so it's really helpful to keep phonics at the back of our heads. Um, so let's look at some tricky sounds over here. Some are really simple, but I want you to practice these sounds with you, because it's easy to overlook these sounds. So what we do is sometimes, when we don't remember the sounds, we can and or if you don't remember that two letters represent one sound, what we do is sometimes we break down these sounds into individual sounds that these letters don't really represent, such as um uh and that's not what the sound is. So if I try reading the word far by breaking down the word according to the one letter one sound rule, it would be f, r. And we know that's not a word. The word is far. So we have to remember the sound. So the sound is R. AR represents the R sound. There's a funny name for it as well. Some people call it the lazy R, because you're not really doing anything. You just open your mouth and you say ah, and you're being lazy about it because you're not really doing anything. So that's a fun way to remember the sound, the lazy R sound. So remember this when you come across words such as far. So it's ah. Remember, there's a lazy R over there, the lazy R there. Same is the case for car, star, all of these words, there's no R at the end. So remember these tricky sounds when you see them, because you can see an R over there, but remember there's no R. And then there's O, such as, in words such as for. So it's O, because it's the O sound and it's not O, R, right? So if we forget
Aisha, I'm
that
sorry.
these two letters.
Aisha, I'm really, really sorry to intervene. That was very helpful for early readers, and I'm sure some of them will pick it up and take more help learning these sounds. Our time is actually up, so I just wanted to ask you if you could wrap up in 30 seconds, if that's okay.
Yes, sure. So just some interesting sounds to remember over there, the ear, and sound. So if you see them in words, remember that these sounds can be slightly tricky. So just to give you a few tips quickly to be able to remember spelling. So whenever you have these complicated spelling lists, or if you're a parent and the kids have these, and your children have these complicated spelling lists, remember to break it down into sounds, such like just like this one. So the word is bright, and if you stretch it with them, even when they're grown up and they can't remember the spellings, just ask them to stretch it. So bright, and they should be able to remember the spelling, like herring, air, herring, right? So they can remember spelling just quickly like that. And so with all of these words, if they can just stretch the words, they can remember the spelling, such as bright. So if I stretch it, bright, I should be able to spell it. Similarly, in eight, eight. So EIGH represents one particular sound over there. There's this really fun and interesting video that's available on Oxford Owl that will help you in identifying these sounds and how they can and how you can see them in different spelling patterns. So there's a lot of help available on Oxford Owl. Log on to oxfordowl.co.uk and go on to the phonics and spelling sections for these wonderful, wonderful tips that will help you remember spelling and will also help you apply those in reading. So that's a little bit from me on Fun with Words. And I really hope that you found these strategies helpful and you'll be able to apply them in when you're reading spelling and when you're trying to remember pronunciation for words.
And it's goodbye for the two of us. Thank you very much for being here with us. Khuda Hafiz.